Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Chad Hufford, and you are back for another great episode of the Blue Collar Millionaire Show, where we empower everyday people to do extraordinary things and build a life of abundance. And today we're going to talk a little bit about legacy, and not just passing along your wealth and the monetary piece, but the wisdom and the mindset to be able to deal with that appropriately. And I have a wonderful guest, Julia Myers with Generational Wisdom. She's going to talk to us about how to empower our kids, empower the next generation, because let's face it, somebody's teaching your kids about money. Either you are or it's TikTok. So Julia, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here and helping our audience prepare that next generation.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor and pleasure to be here and share my story. I say that I am qualified based on the School of Hard Knocks. I am a mom of 5 kiddos, right now ages 8 to 20. So we are counting to calculus in my household. So excited to share a little bit of what I've learned along our wealth and legacy journey.
Well, so you are a practitioner of this. This is not just theory. It's not just ideas and something in a textbook somewhere. I mean, you're making this happen on a day-to-day basis with your own family and the families, the people that you coach and that you talk to. What made you want to do this on a professional level? Like what was the impetus, or what prompted you to say, hey, this is the message I need to bring out into the world?
You know what? Such a great question. And I just think that sometimes in life you grow up following a script of let's earn the money, let's earn the money. And then one day you're like, well, what's it all for? And that day hit me when I was entering in for surgery. And one of the consent forms said, are all your affairs in order? All the things, and the typical consent forms. And this was a place that I had not frequented my healthcare at before. And there was another page that said, how well can your family communicate your wishes? And that just caused me to pause and say, wait a minute. I know what I believe and what I think I want to have happen as it relates to our family and our wealth and our legacy. How confident am I that the kiddos can really articulate what it is that I want as our vision for our family, but also how blessed would they be or how cursed would they be if all of a sudden they instantly got something, say I didn't wake up from surgery or whatever.
Hmm.
So I think we all have those moments that just kind of hit us and say, A, what's it all for? But B, how well have we done in a level of confidence that says they're going to articulate it to a level that we're confident with?
Well, and so much of our world, like we talk about wealth transfer, people think about the legal aspect, the financial aspect, but Julia, you deal with the psychological and emotional aspect as well, because if you only have the first part and don't have the second part, what should be a blessing, like you just talked about, can actually become a burden or a curse. And one of the things that we remind people, or we kind of challenge people, is kind of posing this question. You probably don't have a plan to run out of money in retirement, but do you have a plan not to? And most people don't have a plan to not run out of money. And I think there's really only two financial outcomes when it comes to retirement and, just individual wealth, is either you outlive your money or your money outlives you. And if you outlive your money, it's scary, it's stressful, but part of the planning to make sure your money outlives you is beyond preparing yourself, is preparing your family emotionally, psychologically, getting them to ask the right questions. And we as a society, don't even talk about money. It's a taboo subject. Or if it is brought up, it's only brought up under negative circumstances. Why don't families talk more about money?
Oh, such a great question. And I'm going to echo what you said. and normalize that if you're a parent listening in this conversation, or if you're somebody that has loved ones you're going to leave money to, only 24% of people are actually talking about money. So one in four. So I think that's just a very staggering statistic. And then 42% of parents actually feel confident that their kids are going to manage it successfully. So say you're like, I don't need to talk to my kids, I'm confident. Well, only 42% of people are feeling confident anyway. And in the families that I've worked with, I have really found that it comes down to the money story that we tell ourselves, the money influences that we grew up with, the money influences that were around us, and now the money influences that are pressuring us. Sometimes that's good, pressure to serve more, pressure to give more. But if that pressure is feeling overwhelming, then that's part of our money story we want to unpack. So, yeah, absolutely. Starting with why don't you talk about money? And it all comes down to your money story. And stories usually equal some level of emotion. When talking with families, it might be a feeling of shame, might be a feeling of scarcity. It might be a feeling of our family looks different than other families, and therefore we don't have anything in common anymore. Used to unite us as a family now divides us for whatever reason.
So when you say money story, you're talking about our own preconceived notions, our experiences, maybe even our own emotional baggage that we're bringing into our parenting. Those are some of the obstacles that we have to overcome in order to express and kind of open up this conversation about money with our own kids.
Absolutely. Like with any good personal development piece, you've got to kind of look at, well, where did you come from and where did you start from? Many millionaires are not inheriting money to continue their legacy. They're 80% are, first generation. And so absolutely, when you say and you open with there's no playbook to do this, absolutely. 80% of the time you earned it and you built it. And now you're in a new world and your kids are in a world that you never had. So when we think about our money story, the work that I've done is really focused around four different types of influences. And when we really understand those influences that affect us as individuals now as adults, we can then realize what parts of the story are our story that we absolutely want to keep and continue to pass down. That's legacy, right? So the memories that I have of rolling coins with my dad, sitting at the
Hmm.
table, and your hand smelled like money for days, right? Because that was just something I still do that with my kids just because it's a memory that I have that I enjoy. Physically carrying money to the bank and turning it in was something I remember, and I want them to do too. However, there may be other memories that I had growing up about money that are not ones that I want to bring forward. And it was, you have to work until you're 65 and then you can be happy, or
Hmm.
then you can retire. Or this whole idea that I associated being rich meant getting everything you want and then you're happy. And those are emotions that I don't want to bring into my parenting journey. I don't want my kids to sit around the table and equate, well, someday when we're rich, we'll be happy. I want to get rid of all the emotion when it comes to talking about money, period.
Well, especially in that situation, because then wealth becomes the end in itself. It is not a means of creating a better life. It is the end goal. And chasing wealth is like chasing the horizon. No matter how hard you run, you're never going to get there. And that's I think where we see money being very destructive. If you don't mind, would you touch on those four influences and kind of give our audience a little peek at some of the work that you've done on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I come from a very heavy data and clinical background. So I'm a pharmacist by training. And if you guys can imagine a good fishbone diagram where you've got these different arms leading into that outcome, and that outcome, again, what we're talking about are your financial influences that will then move into the next generation. So the biggest arm and the strongest arm that we see are your family influences. So you think about your first memories of money probably came from your family. For those of us that are kind of in that millennial or Gen X kind of generation, what that meant is our dads worked and our moms stayed home most of the time. That meant that I asked my dad for money. I never asked my mom for money. And so my family influences already are shaping what I'm doing to think about money. When you think of money arguments or money fights or just kind of all the things that you think about money, it all starts with your family. And then when you add a significant other in your life, a partner, a spouse, all of a sudden now you've blended two family influences. And we all know what that's like sometimes is communicating, well, that's not how I did it. And then they're like, that's not how I did it. And you realize that your experiences are so very different than maybe even just the house next door. The second influence that I see a lot is going to be those cultural influences. So, those things around you that you see, that you observe, that you interact with. So, I think of growing up, it's what's the car that my other friends had in high school, you know, or what are the houses that my friends lived in, or where are the vacations that I heard them talking about going. So, culturally, like it was normal to talk about the Joneses. And now today, culture is absolutely a worldwide competition. It's a competitive ladder that cannot be won. It's how fast can we consume to get to the next thing. And so being aware as parents that it's so different now, the influences we had, our pool of comparison is no longer just the physical world that we know. It's that digital electronic world that connects us all, which is great, but sometimes really challenging. The third influence that we see is really the social influence. So, the social constructs sometimes we think about in Western culture, where it's very typical to follow that American dream. You grew up and you went to college. And the only way to succeed in life sometimes was going to college, and then you bought a house and you started a family and you had 2.5 kids and a dog. Well, socially in the eastern part of the world and other parts of the world, that's not the case at all. It's not necessarily the American dream chasing. And so your financial influences are absolutely shaped by those particular just feelings and what you're around. And the last one, which is really interesting, is generational differences, generational influences. So when we think about the boomer generation, that older generation that is retiring from the workforce, they remember their parents talking about the Great Depression. They remember their parents saying, we can't trust the bank. We can't trust inflation. We can't trust these rates. And then maybe in the Gen X and the millennial world, we remember our parents telling us that females couldn't be on mortgages until mid
Hmm.
1970s. And so we think about, okay, generationally, those money differences are very, very significant. Also, in generations, it used to be that it was 30, 40 years in a generation. I'm proud to say I have two generations living under one roof right now. So I have kids in both the Gen Z demographic that are entering the workforce. There are these folks that remember 9/11, but they don't remember life before 9/11. And then I have Gen Alpha. So the kiddos that don't remember life before COVID, the kiddos that have not yet entered the workforce, that is now a very small segment, but who knows what their generational influences are going to be going forward. So I think all four of those combined really tell a story around our first memories of money, our first physical interactions with money. My Gen Zers all opened up bank accounts online. So, how we bank is so very different than what we did in other generations. So, combining all four of those makes us really realize that A, there's no playbook, B, it's complicated, and then C, it's a little bit empowering because we now are the tip of that fishbone. We get to choose by default, because we're the family of the next generation, what are going to be their influences that they carry going forward.
So just to summarize that, we have family, cultural, social, and generational.
Exactly.
And as you were explaining the culture, I just want to point out too, what you said was so powerful that there's always been this pressure to keep up with the Joneses. But the Joneses used to be the people in your immediate tribe, and then they were the people on the farm next to you. And for you and I growing up, they were the people in the neighborhood and people down the street. Now the Joneses could be anywhere in the world. Not only that, you're comparing your worst day to their best day and making interpretations of the world and your own place and value in it based off that. It's just completely different than what I think other generations have dealt with when it comes to contentment and money, and I think you've laid this out well. Like, we're up against a lot. So as a family, and just so our listeners have context for this, Julie's got 6 or 5 kids. I've got six. Between the two of us, we've got a football team. So we're still making this up as we go and trying to figure this out. But if somebody is listening to this and they have not normalized conversations around money, maybe it's because of their own confusion, intimidation, or just they simply haven't thought about it. Where does somebody start? What is one or two like actionable steps that somebody can take to start changing that habit to at least normalize conversations around money and finances?
Oh, that is such a fun question. And I want to give everyone listening that's asking that question a little bit of grace because you've never done this before, and that's okay. And I'm going to give you a pass at your very first topic talking about money. I'm going to say you don't even start talking about money at all. You talk about something that connects on a value level that then can back into money. Because I can promise you, and Chad, you've probably seen this. You sit down at the dinner table, you're going to get some eye rolls from your teenager if you say the compound interest of this particular investment. No, they're just going to, you're going to lose them. However, if you pose a question that is associated with something they value, and then they now can quantify, well, how do you measure value? Or what are our values as a family? That's where we're going to go. So, one of the very first things I like to have parents ask is maybe just to their partner and are their spouse is all on the same page. Because sometimes you'll find they're very different pages, which means then the kids are like, okay, now what? Is Santa Claus real or not real? Like, which one is it? And so I always like to say, what does our schedule say about what we value as a family? What does our schedule say about what we value as a family? I didn't say money, I said schedule, because I like to compare money to things that we can spend. And sometimes we can kind of manage. We never have enough of it. So I like to say money is like time. Another one that we might compare it to is how does what we pay attention to reflect what we value as a family? And where you spend your attention is like spending money. So now we've backed into a more values based approach and less of an emotional or a judgmental or a good spend, bad spend. You're a saver, you're a spender, these labels. If we can jump right into well, we spend a lot of time at work. Okay, well, why do we value work? We spend a lot of time maybe doing extracurriculars or experiences. Usually that means we're engaging money or transacting money there. And then why are we spending maybe money on the weekends, time on the weekends doing service? Maybe that's through your church or maybe that's through volunteering. But I think that what your schedule says may reflect what your budget says. What are your thoughts on
Hmm.
that? And have you seen that play out in the families you work with?
No, I love that. And I wrote down actually some of those questions. And I think tying it to values and backing into finances is so important because not only are you introducing some very important discussion topics, and who knows what you might learn about your kids, but you're tying money in as the tool, a means to an end, not the end in and of itself. So let's step this up a little bit. A lot of our clients, a lot of our listeners, they've already built a substantial amount of wealth. Sometimes a lot of that was after their kids were already grown. So their kids are already out of the house. Is it too late to start empowering your adult children if these weren't conversations you had, or maybe this wasn't even on your radar when you're raising kids? Is it ever too late to begin equipping your kids for that transfer of not just wealth, but the wisdom that has to accumulate, or the wisdom that has to come along with it?
Great question. And I would say it's never too late. It just might be a much harder mountain to climb.
Okay.
So the parent-child relationship at any age, whether you're an adult and an adult, will always have this interesting dynamic. And so what I find in parents that have adult children is reminding them they have the power of being able to discern where they will spend their money, where they will leave their money. And sometimes it means having open conversations with the young adult kids or the adult kids that now have grandkids that say, what are those ways that we're going to encourage behaviors that we're going to encourage that are aligned with our family values? And maybe what are ways they're out of alignment, which would then result in not receiving anything or not receiving an equal amount. I think a lot of times parents that are leaving money think it has to be equal and fair. And I'm going to say it has to do with their level of responsibility and financial maturity. And that goes back to being a blessing or being a curse. How many athletes that have earned NIL money have already spent it? And NIL's only been around for a few years. How many people play the lottery and win the lottery and then it's gone? As a parent, you get to decide, do I want to leave them that burden or that blessing? Or do maybe I start talking to them about it now, or say, how would we use this now? If you had a little extra money around the holidays, how would you use it? And are we going to perpetuate spending habits? Are we going to perpetuate lifestyles that are out of alignment with the level of earning? I hope not. But at the same time, that wealth can now be a head start. It's not a free pass, right? No one gets a free pass on life. Everyone has this calling, this purpose, this thing that they were put here to do. And the amount of money you have does not exempt you from serving that purpose. However, if you've got a head start and you're able to start a business or invest in those kiddos that show an entrepreneurial spirit or maybe a real estate spirit, or they are wanting to do different things, partner with them now on some of those opportunities. It's not going to be your idea as the parent. We know this so well, right? That our kids are all going to be so different and wired so differently. One unique thing we're doing, our kids aren't quite young adult yet, but they're getting there. I'm not a grandma yet, and that's a great thing. But for those grandparents out there, you may think about what are those things you can spend money on now while you're still alive that create memories. Maybe it's
Hmm.
family vacations, maybe it's family experiences, maybe it's not save it for a rainy day, but say, what does it look like to spend now in a way that blesses everyone and unites everyone with kind of those shared values? So I think that's kind of interesting. Our kids also know anything we leave them, they're going to get half. We are going to give half away. That's just a super clear conversation that we've said. They know going into it that half of it's not going to be theirs anyway. And that makes them a steward of the money they do receive, because half of what they get, they've got to give. But it's to their charity, it's to their choice, which is, I think, a unique way that people across many different generations can still be generous without entitling or without enabling. So thinking about not just giving to your charity, but having the next generation or that inheritance generation, by default, half of it's got to go to where they think serves the world in their interests.
That's one of the things that I know you talk about, you raising financially mature kids without entitlement. And I think some people are are afraid they don't want to leave anything because they're afraid it's going to mess their kids up. And other people think, well, they just leave their kids with a big pile of money. Everything's going to work out great. And then you have everything in between. And one of the things that you pointed out, I think is so crucial is it doesn't even necessarily matter the amount of money, but the money that you leave to one kid might be a blessing. That same amount of money to another kid could actually be a burden or a curse, depending on their financial maturity and ability to steward. And I think that's a great word, because if you can't handle a little of it, giving somebody a lot more of it is not going to help them. And I just also want to go back briefly to your comment about first generation millionaires. And about 80%, about 4 and 5 millionaires are first generation millionaires. And I've just thought about this idea of building wealth, almost like physical conditioning. And somebody who's working out, Julie, I know you very committed to your own fitness, but you don't start out moving the heavy weight. It takes years to build up to that. And these first generation millionaires, they've done that. They've spent their career learning how to handle the weight of that wealth, and it benefits them and it strengthens them. But now they're going to just dump it on the back of a child, or even an adult kid. And unless that kid has that same process of being strengthened and learning how to handle that weight, it's like putting a 400-pound bar on the back of somebody who's never done a squat before and expecting it to be a blessing. You've given us so much. And I know that you talk about a lot of these different things in more detail. So you have on your website, you have a kind of a template for starting family conversations. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit what that is about, and then we'll tell people where to find it?
Absolutely. What I like to say is there is a kid tested and mom approved way to have these conversations. And over the hundreds of families I've helped, these are the best conversation starters for any age. You're not going to trigger some emotions. You're not going to talk about politics. So we're going to avoid that heavy stuff. What we are going to do is give you a tool to start that financial conversation. It can be around the holiday table, it can be around mealtime, but 5 questions sent to you over a period of 2 weeks. Because please don't ask all 5 questions at one time, because then you're just about checking the box and less about that conversation. And so if you've got kids of different ages, ask them and let them all kind of play off of each other, because sometimes you'll be really surprised at what the older ones say versus the younger ones. And so one of my favorite things that we did is everybody go around the table. This is not one of the questions, but it's a fun practice, is show me how you were going to pay for something. And if you look around the room, some people grab their wallet, some kids grab their phone, some people are like tapping. And so just knowing that everybody might have a different answer. And when you're answering these family financial questions, it's less about the answer. It's more about, well, how did you get there? And what's resonating with you? And wow, you pay differently than I do. And then there's people in the back of the room that pull out their checkbooks. And then there's kids at the table like, what's a checkbook? So I'm going to give you guys some freedom to play, to explore, to just identify what are those values in your family that you're committed to passing along to that next generation, so that they'll have the wisdom to manage the wealth that you'll be receiving.
Well, I love that. And thank you so much, because I know a lot of people are wondering how to start those conversations. So, 5 family conversations, and it's available on juliamyers.com. We'll put the links in the show notes. But if you're wondering where to start, Julia's got an on ramp for you to get those conversations started, and starting to normalize that. And for those that are already having those conversations, some great fuel for those conversations to deepen them even more. And what a great way to connect with kids. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. I love what you're doing. I would love to have more conversations with you. This is so vital. And like I said, so many of the people that we're working with, they've built a meaningful amount of wealth that can sustain them for the rest of. They don't have to worry about running out of money in retirement, but we need to make sure that money becomes a blessing to that next generation. So, any last words of wisdom that you'd love to leave us with?
I would say I've got 2. One is, remember, your money story is your limit, or your money story can be your leverage. And then if you are leaving generational wealth without wisdom, you're leaving everything up to chance. And so I say, don't play the lottery with your legacy. Talk to your kids about money.
Awesome. Julia, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Chad. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us 2 quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.
The information expressed is for general information only and is not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations for any individual. It is suggested that you consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation. Hypothetical investment results are for illustrative purposes only and should not be deemed a representation of future results.